What is going on, everyone? It is Elijah back at it again with part 2 of Tom Clancy's The World of Division. And we're just going to hop right back into it, alright? December 18th through the 20th, President Waller invokes National Security Presidential Directive 51 to ensure continuity of the federal government in the face of a growing crisis. Boarding Marine One, POTUS is evacuated from the White House to Camp David in Maryland along with his family, cabinet, and senior staff. The president immediately activates the first wave of the Strategic Homeland Division, otherwise known as SHD, and he has embedded agents in New York City. 2 days later, a rolling blackout strikes the sealed-off Midtown Sick Zone. The sector, now a death trap filled with piles of infected corpses, fires burning unchecked, and predatory gangs. This place soon acquires a new name, the Dark Zone. At night, the streets turn into a grim no-man's land of disease, death, and feral savagery. Within 24 hours, the JTF and all medical personnel are forced to abandon the Dark Zone's mass treatment facilities and beat a hasty retreat south. They pull back to the James Farley Post Office in Midtown Manhattan, a massive building that occupies 2 full city blocks, which is 8 acres, and serves as a critical base of operations for both Sarah and the JTF. Later on in December, the first wave of division agents deploys into the Dark Zone to set up an outpost, seeking to quell the violence and restore order. Their disturbing reports suggest an almost unimaginable level of chaos, more primitive than anywhere else in the city. Over the next several days, JTF-based dispatchers gradually lose contact with the entire division team. None of them return. Meanwhile, rioters threaten to overrun the James Farley Post Office. As the new year approaches, New York City is in the vice grip of an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. Preliminary counts suggest more than 200,000 citizens have succumbed to the contagion and violence. Many more have been displaced and linger in shelter or clinics. All basic civic services have shut down. A mass breakout from Rikers Island, the New York City Department of Corrections' 400-acre jail complex on the East River, releases thousands of violent, desperate criminals in the diseased cityscape. Many convicts band together to form a powerful game called the Rikers. Like urban warlords, they start taking brutal control of the neighborhoods. January 1st through the 5th, the president activates division agents in the District of Columbia, where food and gas shortages combined with widespread power outages have triggered large-scale rioting and looting. High-level government officials begin to relocate to secure sites around the country. Following the precedent set in New York City, all military and law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C. are combined under a single command called the Joint Task Force. The National Service helps Sarah establish a quarantine zone for the D.C. area. Infected patients on the Theodore Roosevelt Island, the 88.5-acre National Memorial Site on the Potomac River. Sarah also establishes a sizable refugee camp inside the Smithsonian Castle on the National Mall known as the Castle. The camp is created as a safe haven for out-of-towners stranded in southern D.C. after the early evacuations. January 6. POTUS activates a second wave of division agents in New York City. Despite suffering key losses during the airlift in Manhattan's Harbor District, the new team moves swiftly to dispel rioters and lift the siege on the James Farley Post Office. Once the Manhattan operational hub is secure, the JTF, with heavy Division support begins to expand its presence across the stricken borough, block by block. January 7th, President Waller dies from cardiac arrest. Rumors spread that he succumbed to the virus, triggering a new shockwave of panic. Vice President Thomas Eliezer Mendez is sworn in as POTUS. He refuses to leave D.C. for a remote location. January 10th, the Joint Task Force promotes the head of Maryland National Guard, Colonel Antoine Ridgway, to the JTF Field Commander in the Southeast region. With the new rank of general, Ridgway begins a merciless crackdown on mob violence in the capital. Just a side note here, I just want to put that into perspective right now. January 10th is when the JTF elected Colonel Antoine Ridgway to field commander, not knowing that he would break away and become the leader of one of my favorite gangs in Division 2, the True Sons. But we'll get to that later. Late January, civilian communications in Washington, D.C. go mostly offline as the city's infrastructure crisis continues. Sizable National Guard camps and field distribution centers help maintain order in the southern part of the district, but continuing gas shortages trigger riots north of Pennsylvania Avenue, and fierce gang fighting spreads across the northern neighborhoods. In early February, as the situation in Washington, D.C. worsens, the U.S. military is thrown into crisis. Many units are crippled after suffering from a broken chain of command, rash desertions, and widespread deaths, both to smallpox and the attrition from multiple uprisings in metropolitan areas. International trade shuts down, knocking local economies across the globe into a tailspin. This exacerbates the food and security crises that are arising as a result of the contagion as it inevitably spreads across region to region. So far between December and January, we have the Dark Zone rising to power and getting its new name. We have the Rikers who broke out. President Waller dies, and Eliezer Mendez is sworn in. The second wave of JTF agents have been activated. And basically, we see the first part of Division 1 come into play, where you basically get activated. You and Faye get shot down from the helicopter, and then you basically make your assault on the post office, clear all the rioters out, and then that's basically when you enter the post office. So basically, we were coming in from the introduction to how Green Poison starts, to how Division 1 starts, and also what's going on in DC, which we didn't know until Division 2 was going on. So this whole entire timeline is basically putting everything into place that Division 1 and 2 are now putting into place in the game. February 14th. In DC, several major criminal gangs fighting viciously for control of the region north of Pennsylvania Avenue call a truce and form a council. This meeting unites the murderous factions into a loose confederation called the Hyenas, who employ insurgent-style tactics. Late February, General Ridgway's overzealous and increasingly lethal measures in the support of the forced quarantine lead to reprimands and eventually arrest, a court-martial, and incarceration. But the loyal members of his JTF unit break him out. Under Ridgway's leadership, the renegade force forms a highly trained and well-equipped militia known as the True Sons. Their aim to establish territory and dominate the populace. Military and paramilitary operatives are suddenly recalled from their deployments worldwide and are quietly installed into the quarantine areas within the U.S. So basically, from the 14th on to late February is where we start to see not the actions of Division 2, but the beginnings of Division 2 and how DC basically not fell, but how we come into play. The Hyenas have formed. Ridgway is now the leader of the True Sons, and they kind of skipped over most of the things that happened in February, but basically Colonel Anton Ridgway basically killed some people. He was becoming more and more ruthless, and basically whoever got in his way, he killed. And I did a lore video on the True Sons. You can watch that on the channel. I am going to do a full in-depth lore video on the True Sons later on, but this is just a summary of what has been going on so far. All right. So early March, spring eases some emergency situations that were worsened by the winter weather, and communities nationwide begin adapting to the new reality. But in Washington, D.C., the collapse and withdrawal of the JTF cedes much of the city to gang control. Bitter survivors of a forced quarantine on Theodore Roosevelt Island in the Potomac River overthrow the camp to form a vengeful faction calling themselves the Outcasts. Led by the charismatic Emmeline Shaw, the faction sets up a stronghold in the Potomac Event Center and starts pushing eastward from the Potomac. A Sarah Refugee Center in a university yard at the George Washington University, just west of the White House, began to achieve self-reliance and self-defense. Residents built the area into a settlement community known as the Campus. In the east, General Ridgway's True Sons seized control of the U.S. Capitol building and established its headquarters. There, a powerful, symbolic victory. Late March. Desperate civilians seeking refuge from savage street fighting in northeast D.C. continue to gather in historic Ford's Theater, led by former division agent Odessa Sawyer. After the death of the settlement's previous leader, the residents fortify the structure and build a self-sufficient settlement, simply referred to as the theater. April 9th. Just 3 months after sworn in, President Mendez dies from an apparent suicide. However, the circumstances surrounding his death indicate that the Secret Service may have been compromised. Holed up in NORAD HQ with other members of Congress, Speaker of the House Andrew Ellis is sworn in as the new POTUS. So, for people who haven't necessarily played the game yet and haven't done the Black Tusk Stronghold, basically there are some echoes in Division 2 that lead into President Ellis working with the Black Tusk. And before the game came out, I had made an assumption before we thought that it was Hunters 2.0 that I thought that President Ellis was a bad guy because he says eliminate the division with extreme prejudice. And then you see the Black Tusk come down, and that was it. Now that we know that President Ellis is working with the Black Tusk, I'm really, really excited to see how they flesh him out and if they make him a seriously true bad guy or just someone who wanted to work with Black Tusk for the future of the United States. But we're not going to get into theories right now. We're going to finish this up, and we'll come back to that theory later. Early May. Anti-air missiles strike Air Force One as it returns President Ellis from NORAD to Washington, D.C. The plane crashes near the Capitol, and Ellis survives, but he is captured and held hostage by the Hyenas. The SHD network mysteriously goes down, and division operatives cut off from each other, which lead them back to the nation's capital. Over the following days and weeks, agents arrive from various points across the United States to find the agency's White House base of operations besieged by hostile factions. the beginning of Division 2, basically. Late May, the 3 surviving Washington settlements, the castle, the campus, and the theater, come under increasing pressure from local aggressors. The True Sons, the Outcasts, and the Hyenas, with the division's main base reeling from devastating attacks as well, agency teams are forced to spread their limited resources even thinner as they defend the settlements, hoping to expand the city's network of safe areas and resource trading. Early June, the True Sons launch a chemical attack on the settlement in the old Smithsonian Castle. The castle's defense falls almost immediately, and most of the residents are either killed in fighting or executed upon surrender, but a handful are extracted to safety. Late June, Black Tusk, the organization revealed to be responsible for the SHD network sabotage, advances on DC. President Ellis is extracted from the World Bank by division agents and holds a speech at the White House. Basically, the end of the Division 2 campaign. After a mission to the Capitol, division agents recover a briefcase that is required to access the location of a potential broad-spectrum antiviral. Ellis disappears without a trace as Black Tusk invade DC and put the city under siege. They capture key locations across the city and breach an underground facility, seizing the broad-spectrum antivirals before the division have a chance to intervene. Alright, guys, and that's where we're going to cut off for today. This has been part 2. It's been your boy Elijah. Thank you guys for rocking with me for part 2 of The World Division. And in part 3, we're going to get to chapter 1 called What is a Division? But like always, guys, faith, love, and fortune, and have a good day.